Hello everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in to today's video interview. Tony Restell here from Social Hire, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Alison Humphries. We're going to be talking about how you can grow your recruitment business even in a market like we've had over the last few months. So Alison, thanks so much for joining us. Would you like to start just by telling people about yourself and your company?
Certainly will do. Thank you for inviting me, Tony. My business is Recruitment Leadership. I have basically worked in the recruitment industry for, 35 years across pretty much every market you can name, plus RPO and project-based recruitment, as well as contingent perm and temp and contract. So I now work advising recruitment business owners on how to grow their businesses sustainably and profitably, very often with a view to some future exit event. So I work as a non-exec and strategic advisor.
Fantastic. And I know a lot of business owners watching this will be very keen to figure out ways they could grow their businesses despite what the market may be, throwing at them at the moment. So in terms of growing a recruitment business, would you say it's easier for agencies to expand in their existing geographies with the current specialisms they have, or to move into new geographies? What do you think is easiest for them to achieve?
Right. Okay. So this is not intended to be an evasive answer, but there are many answers to that question. So it very much depends on your market. If you work in a truly global market with very, very high-end candidates, for example, high-end specialist developers who are focused on startup, then that tends to have geographical hubs, even cities. So, for example, and these statistics are all readily available, you would want to have a presence in London, Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, and on the west coast of America, for example, in an ideal world. However, most recruitment businesses in the UK, despite the pressure they will be feeling, and there is no doubt in my mind that if it's not the most competitive recruitment market, it is among the top three, most of them have still got room to expand in the UK with the right customer skills and engagement. So for many markets, there's still much more they can do with really good penetration of every lead, for example, that comes into them on a CV. And indeed, by then expanding, selling into related markets with the same clients. But if you've got genuine intros to client subsidiaries, for example, in overseas, then those are very real opportunities to be followed up. It doesn't mean that you have to go there physically, at least in the short term.
Terrific, thank you. And interesting, what you're saying about the ease of moving abroad, or the challenge, and how the UK market compares with other countries. I've certainly heard lots of business owners who've worked across different international markets say the same thing. So thank you for that. In terms of moving into a new market, whether that's a new geography or a new sector, what are some of the things that you see that undermine recruitment business owners from actually pulling that off?
Okay, well, in the past, I have certainly seen maybe three major things. The first is lack of research. A little bit of anecdotal evidence tends to have legs and get given far more weight than it should in the recruitment industry, to generalize for a moment. So that would be my number one thing, lack of research. Now, the data that you need to research has never been more readily available, and that includes for the private sector as well. And while I think that, for example, the Office of National Statistics tends to be so high, the data tends to be so high level that it's not practical, I would always suggest that people invest some serious time in looking at the market. And the best recruitment markets for contingent recruiters tend to be ones that are quite fragmented, because if you haven't got big monopoly employers, then they don't tend to have well-developed internal talent acquisition teams, and they don't tend to have the what should we call it, the bargaining power to smash margins down. So research first, and research is not the same as putting some guy on that market to have a go. Do the research first before you put expensive headcount on it, because the opportunity cost of doing that could be enormous. Second thing I'd say is that if you are going to new geographical markets, one of the things that often undermines that is just not realizing the actualities. You're dealing very often with time differences, you're dealing language differences, obviously, and sometimes the legal setup in that business is different. So for example, you might be aware of opportunities in Italy, but it's actually incredibly difficult for a non-Italian to break an Italian market, to use an example, and you actually are required to have a physical entity in Italy at the moment. So those things can undermine it. And then the third thing, perhaps a little bit more to do with management and leadership, that I've found is sometimes recruitment leaders undermine their own efforts to get into a new market by measuring the wrong things. They are looking for fees too quickly. Now, rule of thumb, and I'm not sure yet how this will apply in these COVID times, but rule of thumb for me that was good was, can I make it break even in a year when I take into account all the costs, staffing and marketing and research and everything? Can I make it break even within 12 months? Now, sometimes recruiters are saying, well, we're 4 months in and we haven't cut a deal. And if you do put pressure on to make deals very quickly, the unintended byproduct of that very often is that there's a failure to map a market, and that one deal doesn't herald, any more activity. So what you should be measuring is levels of engagement, how many client referrals you can get, how much face time you can get with potential hirers, and yes, opportunities at working a job, but not necessarily just cold hard cash realised.
Fantastic advice. And flipping that the other way, if you were going to advise someone on things they should really make sure they do to ensure a successful launch, obviously research you've just mentioned, any other pointers you would give?
Yes. So number one is, if it is a new market for you, is try and prioritize. You are not going to be able to offer every flavour of candidate in that new market ASAP. You need to start by stocking your inventory, if you will, and obviously that's candidates in our business. And so what that means is actually putting a considerable amount of effort into getting to know candidates within a very narrow discipline. So if, for example, you were trying to break into a new market in legal practice, you cannot possibly cover, tax lawyers and litigators and property lawyers and contract lawyers and so forth all in one go. So prioritize the disciplines that you're going to work on, and gear your communications and your advertising that way. So you've actually got some stock when you do get a sniff of interest, if you will. Otherwise, you are going to destroy your reputation before you're even, out of the gates. So prioritize your activity. And once you feel you've got a good grip on that specialist function, you can broaden that out into others. But be honest and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not there yet," if you get a job requirement where you've got no stock. Yeah. Second piece of advice I'd give is that piggybacking in the best commercial sense can be really valuable. So wherever you can identify an organisation that is not competitive with you but sells to the same decision makers in the same market, then any kind of joint marketing activity, mutual referrals that you can do will absolutely pay dividends. And if you've got no presence in that market, then you kind of borrow some as long as your partner is obviously reputable. And if you think about it, actually, Tony, that's what we're doing now, isn't it? We talk to the same decision makers, but you and I are not in competition. So this is a living, breathing example, if you will.
Absolutely.
A third piece of advice is about marketing. So look, I can remember a time when marketing was a frilly nice to have, and recruitment businesses were driven by the actual sales activity, good old on the phone stuff. And I'm sure you can as well. But I think we've all wised up about that now, that in this market, people don't readily take calls from people they've never heard of, haven't been referred to, and who cannot produce evidence of some sort of credibility or track record. So you really need to be prepared to invest in some marketing, to brand building marketing, which is tricky if you've got no track record. But most of us can use a bit of ingenuity to transfer their existing track record into something that has mileage for the new market. And be prepared to invest in that as a brand building exercise. Some knowledge sharing, some celebrity, if you will, interviews go a long way as well. And make sure that goes out consistently, so that whoever you put on the actual sales activity has something to refer to, some backup. And yeah, to go back to my previous point about measure the right things, very often you will be getting job opportunities in a new market that, are probably second, third hand. They've probably already gone out to other recruiters. The job may already have been worked. So, or people simply don't have a need at that time. So make sure that you have some backup collateral to send those people and keep the conversation going. And I suppose just to finish off on that point, I've found a lot of recruiters have only ever worked now in the market where there were already jobs, and they're quite stumped when a client doesn't have a requirement at the time. They don't know how to develop that conversation into how is the market affecting you, how might your requirements change in the future, who else in your organization should I be speaking to, how are hiring decisions made in your organization, and gathering all that really valuable market intel. Otherwise, if your only objective when you actually do get to speak to someone is to take a job, you're going to be massively disappointed, and you're not going to have moved the conversation forward. So make sure that whoever you're putting on that market actually has a good understanding of what their fallback objectives are, and can broaden that conversation so there's something to go back to.
Alison, that's fantastic advice. Thank you ever so much for your time today, and wish everyone a great rest of the week.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye for now.